Checkmate. Arthur said it so quietly that some people in the room did not hear the word at first. They heard the rook land. They heard the chess clock ticking into the silence. They heard Julian Vance stop breathing long enough to stare at the board like it had turned against him. A second earlier, Julian had been smiling for his stream, leaning back beneath the ring lights, enjoying the laughter of rich spectators who had paid to watch another stranger get humiliated. A second later, his smile was gone. His queen was trapped. His king had nowhere to go. His attack had become a cage, and the man in the oil-stained jacket across from him was sitting perfectly still with one hand resting on a blue plastic pen in his pocket. Nobody moved. The men holding drinks forgot to drink. The women leaning against the rail forgot to whisper. Even the chat feed on the giant screen looked unreal, messages flooding upward so quickly that they blurred into one solid block of panic. Julian leaned forward. Counted squares. Touched a bishop, then stopped. Reached for his queen, then froze again. He knew what the crowd did not know yet. This was not a trick. It was not a prank for the stream. It was not one flashy move that still left room for escape. The board was dead. His king was dead. The man he had spent the last 10 minutes mocking had walked him into a hallway with no doors. Arthur did not smile. He did not gloat. He did not play to the camera. He only looked at Julian with the tired calm of a man who had come for one thing and one thing only. $10,000. Not glory. Not revenge. Not internet fame. $10,000 before midnight. That was why he had walked into this underground club. That was why he had let a millionaire grandmaster call him pathetic in front of thousands of viewers. That was why he had sat there and taken every insult like it was weather. Julian finally laughed once, a dry, ugly sound meant to buy himself a little time. He looked toward the cameras as if a joke might save him. It didn't. He bent over the board again, whispering coordinates under his breath, running the position backward, trying to find the moment where his certainty had turned into a trap. Around him, the room remained stunned, because people who pay to watch humiliation are never prepared to see it reverse directions. Then Arthur said it again. Checkmate. 12 hours earlier, the only sound Arthur cared about was the beeping machine beside his daughter's hospital bed. It was a small sound, clean and regular, but it had a way of taking over the room. The monitor beeped. The oxygen line hissed softly. Air moved through the vent above them. Arthur sat in a hard plastic chair and sang under his breath because Emma liked the song and because singing kept his own fear from spilling out where she could see it. Her face looked too pale against the pillow. Her eyes were closed. Her hand was warm in his, but too light, too fragile, the hand of a child who should have been playing somewhere loud instead of lying under hospital blankets with wires near her chest. When he reached the part of the lullaby her mother used to sing louder, Emma smiled without opening her eyes. It lasted only a second, but Arthur held on to it like a promise. Then someone knocked. Dr. Levin stepped into the room with a folder pressed against her chest. She had the soft, measured voice of someone who spent her life delivering hope with conditions attached. First came the good news. A surgical slot had opened sooner than expected. A specialist was available. Emma could be moved up. It was the chance they had been waiting for. Arthur felt himself breathe for the first time all day. Then came the price of that chance. The hospital needed a $10,000 deposit by midnight to secure the procedure. Not the full bill. Just the deposit. Insurance was delayed. Policy was policy. If the payment did not clear in time, the slot would go to another family ready to pay. Dr. Levin explained it as gently as she could, but there is no gentle way to attach a clock to a parent's hope. Arthur nodded because he could not trust his voice. Midnight. Deposit. Surgery. Miss the deadline, lose the chance. The words kept striking the same place inside him until they blurred. When the doctor left, the room changed. Nothing had moved, yet everything was harder to breathe around. Arthur stood, walked to the window, came back to the bed, looked at the monitor, looked at the clock, looked at his daughter, then looked away. Emma opened her eyes and asked if he was okay. He smiled too fast and told her yes. Fathers lie like that because children should not have to manage adult panic. He kissed her forehead and said he needed to make some calls. She asked if he would be back before dinner. He told her yes, because at that moment yes was the only answer a little girl deserved. Out in the hallway, Arthur pulled out his phone and started with the names people call only when pride has already failed. His brother. No answer. A former co-worker who still owed him. No answer. His cousin. Straight to voicemail. He called the bank and spent 5 minutes inside a cheerful menu before being denied for the kind of emergency loan that exists in advertisements but almost never in real life. He called a payday lender. He called a man who lent cash from the back office of a tire shop. He called anybody who had ever once said, "If you ever need anything, let me know." Now he needed something. Almost none of them let him know anything. No. 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 The answers came in different voices, but they all meant the same thing. Arthur paced the stairwell under humming fluorescent lights while the hospital grew quieter around him. He looked at his hands and saw grease that never fully washed out, small cuts along the knuckles, the history of a life spent fixing other people's broken things. He was 38. He worked hard. He paid what he could when he could. None of that mattered now. Midnight was coming, and effort had no market value unless it could turn into cash. Desperation is a scavenger. It digs through the sealed parts of a person's life and finds the one thing he swore he would never touch again. Arthur drove home with the radio off. His apartment stood in a tired building on a corner where the paint had been losing for years. Inside, the place looked exactly like what it was, a home built by one overworked father for one little girl. A half-finished drawing sat on the counter beside an unpaid electric bill. A pink hair tie lay near the sink. Emma's sneakers were by the door, one untied. Ordinary things. Precious things. Arthur stared at them for a second, then crossed to the bedroom closet and pried up a warped floorboard near the back. Under it was a wooden box wrapped in an old flannel shirt. He lifted it carefully. The box felt heavy in a way that had nothing to do with wood. Inside were the weighted chess pieces he had not touched in years. Beside them, folded into the lid, was a yellowing newspaper clipping from a youth tournament. Arthur at 16. Skinny. Sharp-eyed. Called a prodigy by adults who assumed talent always leads somewhere clean. Back then, he had been the kid coaches whispered about. The one with instincts nobody could teach. The one expected to keep climbing. Then life had interrupted the storyline other people had planned for him. His mother got sick. Bills arrived. His wife got pregnant. Jobs replaced tournaments. Responsibility replaced applause. And when his wife died bringing Emma into the world, chess became something he could not forgive. It represented hours he no longer had for himself. Dreams he could not afford to feed. A private gift that felt selfish in a life ruled by survival. So he packed the pieces away and let that version of himself disappear. Now, kneeling on the floor with midnight coming, he opened the box and touched the worn head of a knight. Memory came back fast. Tournament halls. Clock pressure. The feel of patterns surfacing before anyone else could see them. It did not feel like nostalgia. It felt like a buried tool asking whether he was finally desperate enough to use it. He shut the lid and started stripping the apartment of anything that could become money. Power tools. Tool belt. Television. Portable heater. An old microwave stored in the hall closet. He packed them into a duffel bag until he ran out of space. Then he found his wife's wedding ring in a small dish inside the dresser. He sat on the bed with the ring in his palm for a long time. Some decisions do not feel like choices. They feel like small acts of violence you commit because love has left you no cleaner option. He remembered their courthouse wedding. He remembered fumbling through the wrong pocket while she laughed. He remembered her saying that his best quality was always the same, no matter how hard life got. Part of him still acted surprised that it was real. That surprise was gone now. Only love remained. Heavy. Ruthless. Practical. He added the ring to the bag. The pawn shop owner looked at Arthur the way cash businesses look at grief, with caution first, empathy maybe later if the numbers allow it. One by one, Arthur laid his life on the counter. The owner tested the tools, checked the television, weighed the ring, tapped at a calculator, and pushed forward an offer so small it felt insulting. Arthur said he needed more. The man shrugged. Arthur said his daughter was in the hospital. Something shifted in the owner's face. Not kindness, exactly. More like discomfort forced into arithmetic. He added a little. Then a little more. In the end, the count reached $1,000. Crisp bills. Nowhere near enough. Arthur took them anyway because 10% of hope was still more than none. Outside, evening was sliding over the city. Arthur stood at a bus stop with the envelope in his hand and the duffel bag at his feet, trying not to think about how quickly hospitals burn through money. That was when he heard Julian Vance's voice. A teenager on the bench nearby was watching a live stream without headphones. Julian's voice cut through the traffic with effortless arrogance. Arthur glanced at the screen. There he was, perfect hair, expensive watch, suit open at the collar, seated beneath bright ring lights at a velvet table inside some private club. Across from him sat a sweating amateur in a cheap jacket while Julian narrated the game for thousands of viewers. "Look at him," Julian said, laughing for the stream. He really thought effort was enough. A few moves later he took the man's queen, then asked him whether this was the part where he blamed nerves or whether he wanted to admit he had never belonged at the table. The crowd around Julian laughed on cue. The man across from him shrank in his chair. It was cruel, theatrical, and practiced. Humiliation was not a side effect of Julian's games. It was the product he sold. Arthur kept watching. Julian finished the man off, collected the money, then looked straight into the camera and announced that the club was still open. $50,000 challenge bounty tonight. Cash games only. 10-to-1 odds for approved amateurs who felt brave enough to donate. Location pinned below the stream. Donate. Arthur felt something old wake up inside him. Julian was good. Arthur could see that immediately. Fast hands. Sharp tactical eye. Aggressive instincts. But he could also see the flaw underneath the performance. Julian played like a man addicted to momentum. He pressured weaker opponents until they panicked, then treated the panic as proof of his superiority. That style is deadly against people who only know how to defend themselves once. Against the wrong opponent, it becomes vanity with a clock attached. Arthur pulled up the stream on his own phone and watched all the way across town. Another amateur fell. Then another. Julian mocked their clothes, their posture, their hesitation. He made each victory look inevitable. The viewers loved it. So did Julian. That was the important part. He no longer played only to win. He played to be seen winning. Men like that leave openings even when they are brilliant. By the time Arthur stepped off the bus, he had made the only decision left to make. He returned to the hospital first. Emma was awake, coloring with borrowed markers and trying to act braver than she felt. Arthur sat beside her and told her he had to go take care of something important. She asked if it was work. He said something like that. Children hear the lie in those words, but good children pretend not to. Before he left, Emma dug through the drawer beside her bed and handed him a cheap blue pen she liked to steal from clinic counters. "For luck," she said. Arthur clicked it once and slid it into his pocket. "I'll bring it back. And finish the song later." I'll sing all of it. He walked out before his face could betray him. The club was hidden beneath an old warehouse near the river, behind a steel door guarded by a bouncer who looked Arthur over as though poor men were unusual species in that part of town. Arthur gave the password from the stream and showed the envelope. The bouncer hesitated, eyes lingering on the work jacket, the scuffed boots, the tired face. For a moment Arthur thought he might be rejected for not looking expensive enough to fail publicly. Then the buzzer sounded. Inside, the air changed. Bass thumped through the walls. Glass clinked. Money laughed in low voices. The hallway was draped in dark fabric that tried too hard to look exclusive. At the end of it waited the main room, half casino and half arena, lined with leather chairs, polished tables, glowing screens, and spectators who had mistaken cruelty for culture. Smaller games ran around the edges, but everyone's attention kept drifting back to the central platform where Julian reigned beneath bright lights and 3 cameras. Then Julian stood, spread his arms toward the room, and asked who was next. Arthur stepped forward. The reaction began as a ripple. A few heads turned. Then more. In rooms built for status, poverty is louder than a shout. Arthur climbed onto the platform, set his duffel bag beside the chair, and sat across from Julian without asking permission. The cameras adjusted. Several people laughed immediately. Julian smiled the patient smile of a man preparing to be entertaining. "You lost?" he asked. Arthur laid the envelope on the table. "I'm here to play." Julian glanced at the envelope. "That all?" 1,000. The nearby crowd chuckled. 1,000 buys a lesson, Julian said. "Then give me odds." Now the room really leaned in. Julian's smile sharpened. "How much are you asking for?" 10 to 1. Laughter broke out around the platform. Phones came up. Even the dealer at a nearby side table stopped to listen. Julian angled himself toward the camera, enjoying the moment before he answered. "Bullies love a witness. You know who I am?" "Yes." "And you still want 10 to 1? "Yes." Arthur's calm irritated him. It was visible. Julian preferred flinching. He preferred apology in a man's posture before the first piece even moved. Instead he found a pair of exhausted eyes that did not worship him and did not ask for approval. That alone made him careless. He reached into a leather case beside the table and pulled out a thick stack of cash. "Fine," he said for the benefit of the viewers. 1,000 says you walk out embarrassed. If you somehow win, you leave with 10. Arthur looked at the money once. Then at the board. That was the first thing Julian misunderstood all night. He mistook stillness for fear. The pieces were set. White to Julian. Black to Arthur. 5 minutes each. Blitz. Fast enough to punish nerves and reward performance. The clock started. Julian opened aggressively, grabbing space with the confidence of a man entering his own house. Arthur answered with solid, ordinary moves. Safe. Quiet. Unimpressive. Julian played quickly, snapping pieces into place with a little extra force, each move followed by the hard click of the clock. Arthur took longer. He let his fingers hover. He considered, withdrew, then moved. The crowd read hesitation. Julian read weakness. Both readings pleased him. By move 6, he started talking. That jacket older than you? Arthur ignored him. Julian developed another piece. Mechanic? Construction? Let me know if you need any of these ideas explained in working man language. A few spectators laughed. Arthur kept watching the board. Julian pressed again. Or maybe gambling debt. That's usually what brings this look through the door. Just play, Arthur said softly. The softness bothered Julian more than anger would have. Anger was useful. Softness felt like dismissal. So he attacked harder. That was the second thing he misunderstood. Then Arthur heard his daughter cough in his memory. It cut through everything. The bass. The laughter. Julian's voice. The ticking clock. For one dangerous second the board blurred. Arthur closed his eyes. Inhaled. Exhaled. Touched the pen in his pocket and clicked it under the table. One click. His breathing slowed. When he opened his eyes again, the board returned to him the way old music returns to a player's hands. Not as chaos. As pattern. Julian was pressing too fast. His queen had drifted forward before his king was truly safe. His pieces looked active, but some were stepping on each other's escape squares. His attack depended on Arthur continuing to panic. That was the hidden assumption beneath every move. Arthur stopped panicking. He pushed a pawn in a way that looked bad. The reaction was immediate. Julian barked a laugh and turned to the camera. "Watch this," he said. "I'm ending his misery early." He thrust his queen deeper into attack. Arthur retreated a knight, a move that looked even worse to people who only understood confidence by its volume. Someone near the rail actually clapped. Julian shook his head with theatrical pity and snatched Arthur's bishop, winning material and opening lines. The crowd rewarded the greed because greed, when dressed in confidence, often looks like genius. Arthur pressed the clock. 42 seconds remained for him. Julian still had more than a minute. Arthur chose the fatal line. He slid his rook across the board. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just certain. The piece landed with a clean, final thud. Arthur lifted his eyes and said, "Checkmate." Julian did not speak. He bent over the board, touching pieces without moving them, counting lines, tracing squares. His face lost color under the lights. He picked up his queen and set it back down as though the answer might appear if he handled the pieces gently enough. It didn't. His king had no legal square. His defenders were pinned or useless. The very force of his attack had clogged the routes he now needed open. Arthur had invited him forward, then closed the door behind him. Pride always believes invitation means control. That was Julian's real blunder. At last he looked up. "Who are you?" Arthur could have given him the old story. Former prodigy. Tournament kid. Headlines and praise and a vanished future. The crowd would have loved it. A hidden genius disguised as a working man. The myth would have spread even faster than the clip already was. But Arthur had not come there to recover an old identity. He had come there to buy time for his daughter. So he reached for the money instead. Julian's hand twitched as if he wanted to stop him, but humiliation had already slowed every instinct he had. Arthur opened his duffel bag and swept the thick stacks inside. Real salvation does not always sound dramatic. Sometimes it is just paper sliding against paper. "You hustled me," Julian said. Arthur zipped the bag. "No." Julian stared. "You beat yourself." The line landed harder than a shout. Because it was true. Julian knew it. The crowd knew it. Even the chat racing past on the screen seemed to know it. For all his talent, for all his speed, for all his money and cameras and spectators, he had still made the oldest mistake in any contest. He had mistaken contempt for insight. Arthur lifted the duffel and stood. This time, when he moved, the crowd made space for him. Respect often arrives late and embarrassed. He did not look at the cameras. He did not acknowledge the phones following him or the men already muttering that the clip was going viral. He walked off the platform, through the velvet hallway, and out into the cold night air while noise exploded behind him. Replay it. Freeze the board. Who is he? How did Julian miss that? This is everywhere already. Arthur kept moving because the only countdown he cared about was still running uptown beside a hospital bed. In the truck, the duffel sat on the passenger seat like something alive. Arthur gripped the wheel and drove as if every red light were a personal insult. $10,000. He had it. That should have felt like relief. Instead it felt like a fragile lead in a game not yet won. Fate is dangerous right before the finish line. At the hospital billing office, he nearly lost his mind over paperwork. Forms. Signatures. Verification. Systems have a cruel talent for demanding calm from people in the middle of emergencies. Arthur forced his hands steady, repeated Emma's full name twice when his voice cracked the first time, and watched the cashier feed the bills into a counting machine. When the receipt finally printed, one word on it mattered. Paid. It looked almost unreal. Dr. Levin found him outside the office and let out the breath she had clearly been holding all evening. The surgical slot was secure, she said. The team would prep in the morning. Arthur nodded, then sat down because his knees were suddenly no longer reliable. Relief is not always gentle. Sometimes it hits like a collapse delayed by necessity. He covered his face with both hands and cried so quietly that anyone passing might have mistaken it for exhaustion. Emma was awake when he got back to the room. The lights were lower now. The beeping monitor was still keeping time. She smiled as soon as she saw him. "Daddy's back," she whispered. He sat beside her, took her hand, and said, "I told you I'd finish the song." And he did. He sang the lullaby from the beginning, every line her mother used to know, while phone screens all over the city replayed Julian Vance getting dismantled in 3 moves. By dawn, the clip had spread far outside the club. Chess channels slowed it down frame by frame. Sports pages called it one of the most humiliating blitz losses anyone had seen on stream. Old tournament records surfaced. People found Arthur's teenage results and built legends out of fragments. Some called him the Ghost Prodigy. Others called him the working man assassin. Stranger still, some insisted the match had to be staged, because people raised on performance often struggle to accept plain truth when it arrives without branding. Arthur ignored all of it. A reporter called the hospital. He declined comment. An old acquaintance texted him a screenshot of Julian's subscriber count falling. Arthur did not answer. The internet wanted a comeback story, a redemption arc, a mysterious genius restored to his rightful place. Arthur wanted his daughter through surgery alive. The two priorities had nothing to say to each other. Arthur never responded. Some victories speak well enough on their own. The surgery took hours. Arthur spent them in a waiting room with a cup of coffee gone cold between his hands and a head full of memories he had not invited back. Chess clocks. Tournament halls. His wife laughing. Emma as a newborn closing her tiny fist around his finger. Stress rearranges memory into strange company. He sat there and understood something simple. He had spent years thinking he abandoned chess for love. The truth was harder. He had abandoned the part of himself that believed his gift belonged in his life at all. Love had not asked for that. Fear had. When Dr. Levin finally came through the doors with tired eyes and a smile she could no longer hide, Arthur stood so fast his chair scraped across the floor. The surgery had gone well. Those 5 words remade the world. Weeks later, when Emma was recovering well enough to complain about hospital food and ask impossible questions again, Arthur brought the wooden chess box to her bedside. She opened it like treasure. He showed her the chipped king, the blunted knight, the queen worn smooth by old games. She asked if this was the set he used to win the money. He said yes. She asked if he was famous now. He smiled and told her fame and usefulness were not the same thing. Then he taught her how pawns move. Not because he wanted her to become a prodigy. Not because he thought pain had to become destiny. But because some gifts should not stay buried so long that they only come out during emergencies. Emma listened carefully, tongue peeking out in concentration, and when she finally managed a clumsy little check against him, she grinned so fiercely that Arthur had to look away for a second. Life did not become magical after that. Bills still arrived. His tools had to be replaced one stubborn paycheck at a time. The apartment stayed small. The truck still coughed on cold mornings. But something important had shifted. Arthur no longer carried his past like a locked room under the floorboards. He carried it like a tool returned to the proper drawer. Heavy. Useful. Honest. Months later, a regional chess foundation invited him to speak to a group of young players about leaving and returning to the game. He almost threw the letter away. Emma asked whether there would be snacks. He laughed and said there probably would be, so they went. Arthur stood in front of 30 teenagers and told them the part no highlight clip ever shows. That talent is not a crown. It is a responsibility. That brilliance goes rotten when it is fed only pride. That some people will look at your hands, your clothes, your address, and decide where they think you belong before you ever speak. Let them. The board does not care. Life does not care. Both of them answer only to what is true. And the truth is simple. A person is not harmless just because hardship taught him to stay quiet. And a father with one move left is still a father with one move left.